Awaken. Admiral HFY of the Zolonian Empire stood before the massive viewport of his flagship, the Dominion's Edge, watching the strange readings cascade across his tactical displays. For 3 centuries, the Empire had ruled this sector of the galaxy with absolute authority, their advanced technology and superior firepower keeping dozens of species in line. Yet something about the energy signatures coming from the small blue planet ahead made his 4 hearts beat faster. The Terran system had been marked as a low-priority observation zone for over 200 years. The species there called themselves humans, and according to Imperial records, they were barely capable of interplanetary travel. Their small colonies on nearby moons showed primitive technology, basic fusion reactors, and simple chemical propulsion systems. Nothing that could challenge even the Empire's oldest patrol ships. But the readings his science officer, Commander Thrix, was showing him painted a very different picture. "Admiral," Thrix said, her crystalline voice carrying notes of confusion, "the energy patterns we're detecting don't match our previous surveys. These signatures are significant. Deep space installations, massive power cores, and what appears to be a defensive grid spanning the entire system." HFY's tail twitched, a sign of irritation among his people. "Impossible. Our last comprehensive scan was only 50 years ago. No primitive species could develop such infrastructure in that time frame." "That's just it, sir," Thrix continued, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the data streams. "When I compared the current readings to our historical records, I found something disturbing. The energy signatures have been there all along, but they were masked by some kind of dampening field. Whatever the humans were using to hide their true capabilities, they've started turning it off." The implications hit HFY like a plasma bolt to the chest. If the humans had been deliberately concealing their technology for decades, it meant they had been watching the Empire just as carefully as the Empire thought it had been watching them. It also meant they had chosen this moment to reveal themselves for a reason. "Set course for the 3rd planet," he ordered. "Maximum diplomatic protocols. If the humans have been hiding their strength, I want to know why they're showing it now." The journey to Earth took 6 standard days, and with each passing hour, the energy signatures grew stronger and more complex. What had appeared to be a simple defensive grid revealed itself as a multi-layered system of incredible sophistication. Orbital platforms that had been invisible to Imperial sensors materialized as the dampening fields weakened, revealing structures that dwarfed anything in the Empire's own arsenals. By the time they reached Earth's outer system, even HFY's experienced crew was staring in silence at their displays. Hidden asteroid bases, camouflaged battle stations, and what appeared to be an entire fleet of warships tucked behind the planet's moon began appearing on their screens like stars emerging from behind clouds. "Incoming transmission from the human homeworld," reported the communications officer, his voice tight with nervousness. "On screen," HFY commanded, straightening his ceremonial armor and preparing for what he expected would be either a surrender or a declaration of war. Instead, a human woman appeared on the view screen, sitting calmly in what looked like a simple office. She was middle-aged by human standards, with short brown hair and wearing a plain blue uniform. What struck HFY immediately was her expression. Not fear, not anger, but a gentle, almost amused smile. "Greetings, Admiral HFY," she said, her voice warm and welcoming. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Coordinator. We've been expecting you." The casual nature of her greeting caught the Admiral off guard. In 3 centuries of first contacts, he had never encountered a species that seemed so relaxed when facing the might of the Imperial fleet. "Captain Chen," he replied formally, "I am Admiral HFY of the Zolonian Empire. We have come to investigate unusual energy readings from your system. Your species has been under Imperial observation for some time, and recent developments require explanation." Sarah's smile widened slightly. "Of course they do. Would you like to come aboard our orbital station for discussions? I think you'll find it quite interesting. We have a lot to show you." The confidence in her voice was unsettling. HFY had seen this kind of calm before, but only from species that possessed overwhelming military superiority. Yet, according to all imperial records, humans barely had interplanetary capabilities. "Very well," he agreed. "We'll dock with your station." "Oh, Admiral," Sarah added, almost as an afterthought, "you might want to have your tactical officer take a closer look at your sensor readings on the way in. I think you'll find some interesting details we've been saving for the right moment." The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at a blank screen. He turned to Thrix, who was already bent over her sensor array, her crystalline form shifting colors as she processed new data. "Admiral," she whispered, and there was fear in her voice now. "I'm reading massive structures throughout the system. Ships, stations, defensive platforms. They're everywhere. And they're all coming online simultaneously." "How many ships?" Kethvar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. I can't get an accurate count. My sensors are being interfered with, but conservatively. Hundreds, possibly thousands. And Admiral," she paused, her form flickering between deep blue and alarmed red, "some of these vessels are larger than our dreadnoughts." Kethvar felt his confidence evaporating like water in vacuum. The Empire's military doctrine was built on technological superiority and overwhelming force. They had never encountered a species that could match their capabilities, let alone exceed them. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Humanity had not only developed advanced technology in secret, but had built a military infrastructure that potentially rivaled the Empire itself. The docking procedure with the human station was smooth and professional, revealing advanced gravitational manipulation technology and energy systems that operated on principles the Empire scientists would struggle to understand. When Kethvar and his diplomatic team materialized in the station's transport chamber, they found themselves in a clean, well-lit facility that hummed with subtle power. Captain Chen was waiting for them, still wearing that same mysterious smile. She was joined by a tall, dark-skinned human male who introduced himself as Director Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Initiative. "Welcome to Terra Prime Station," Sarah said, gesturing for them to follow her down a corridor lined with large windows. "I hope your journey wasn't too stressful. We know how unsettling it can be when your understanding of a situation changes suddenly." Through the windows, Kethvar could see the curve of Earth below, blue and green and beautiful. But what captured his attention were the ships. Massive, sleek vessels that seemed to blend advanced metallurgy with elegant design. They moved through space with a grace that spoke of incredible technological sophistication. "How long?" he asked simply. Sarah glanced at him, understanding immediately. "How long have we been preparing?" "Since our first radio telescope detected your scout ships, about 230 years ago. We realized early on that we were being watched, cataloged, and judged, so we decided to play the long game. You've been deceiving us for over 2 centuries. We've been protecting ourselves," Director Webb corrected gently. "When we analyzed your communication patterns and observed your interactions with other species, we realized that the Zolonian Empire operates on a philosophy of strength through dominance. We weren't ready to be dominated, so we chose to appear weak while we became strong." They entered a large observation deck where the full scope of humanity's hidden fleet was visible. Ships of all sizes moved in perfect formation, their hulls reflecting Earth's sunlight like polished mirrors. The technology on display was clearly advanced, incorporating principles that the Empire's best scientists had only theorized about. "Your weapons?" Kethvar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Superior to yours in most categories," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "Our defensive systems are certainly more advanced. We've had the advantage of studying your technology for decades while developing countermeasures in secret." The Admiral felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest and exploration. Genuine fear mixed with grudging respect. The humans had not only matched the Empire's capabilities but had done so while maintaining the pretense of being a primitive species. The level of coordination, planning, and technological development required for such a deception was staggering. "What happens now?" he asked, expecting ultimatums or demands. Instead, Sarah's smile became even warmer. "Now we talk. We've been alone in this corner of the galaxy for a very long time, Admiral. We've watched your empire, studied your history, and learned about your people. Despite your military approach to diplomacy, we believe there's potential for a different kind of relationship. You're not declaring war. Why would we?" Director Webb asked, genuinely puzzled. "War is wasteful, destructive, and ultimately counterproductive. We've built our defenses to ensure our freedom, not to conquer others. What we're offering is partnership, between equals." As HFY looked out at the human fleet, understanding the implications of what he was seeing, he realized that the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy had just shifted permanently. The Empire would have to adapt to a new reality where humanity was not a subject species, but a potential rival or ally. And throughout it all, the humans simply smiled. When giants stopped pretending to sleep, 3 days after the initial meeting, Admiral HFY found himself in the uncomfortable position of reporting to the Imperial High Command that their assumptions about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. The response from the Empire's central authority was swift and predictable. A battle fleet comprising 12 heavy cruisers and the dreadnought Imperial Fist was dispatched to the Terran system with orders to demonstrate Imperial superiority and bring the humans to heel. HFY watched the approaching fleet with growing unease. During his extended stay aboard Terra Prime Station, he had witnessed technological marvels that challenged everything he thought he knew about physics and engineering. The humans had shown him manufacturing facilities that operated with impossible efficiency, energy systems that seemed to violate thermodynamic laws, and defensive technologies that made Imperial shields look like decorative glass. More disturbing was their attitude. Captain Sarah Chen and Director Webb continued to treat him with friendly professionalism, as if the arrival of an Imperial war fleet was merely an expected inconvenience rather than an existential threat. They had even invited him to observe their response from the station's command center. "Your fleet will arrive in approximately 6 hours," Sarah noted, checking a holographic display that showed ship positions throughout the system. "Admiral Vorthak is commanding, I believe. We've reviewed his tactical history. He's competent but conventional in his approach." "You've been monitoring Imperial communications?" HFY asked, though he was no longer surprised by human capabilities. "Among other things," Director Webb replied absently, his attention focused on a complex three-dimensional tactical map. "We've been preparing for this conversation for decades. Your empire has a tendency to respond to unexpected developments with overwhelming force, so we expected this moment would come eventually." The Human Command Center was a marvel of integrated technology and organic design. Dozens of technicians worked at stations that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch, while massive screens displayed real-time information about everything happening within 100 light-years of Earth. What struck HFY most was the calm efficiency of it all. No one seemed panicked or even particularly concerned about the approaching Imperial fleet. "You cannot possibly defeat 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought," he stated, though his conviction was weaker than his words suggested. Sarah turned to him with that same mysterious smile. "Admiral, may I ask you something? In all your years of service, how many species have you encountered that were genuinely happy to see Imperial forces arrive in their systems?" The question caught him off guard. Most species show appropriate deference to Imperial authority." "That's not what I asked. How many were happy? How many welcome your arrival with genuine enthusiasm?" HFY thought about it and realized the answer was none. Species either submitted out of fear, fought out of desperation, or attempted to bargain from positions of weakness. He had never encountered a civilization that seemed genuinely pleased to have the Empire's attention. "We're happy you're here," Sarah continued. "All of you. Because this conversation has been a long time coming, and we're tired of pretending to be something we're not." Before HFY could respond, alerts began sounding throughout the command center. Not alarm sounds, but the kind of routine notifications that preceded scheduled operations. "Admiral Vorthak is hailing us," reported a human communications officer. "Put him through," Sarah said, settling into her command chair with the relaxed posture of someone about to have a pleasant conversation. The main screen flickered to life, showing the imposing figure of Admiral Vorthak, his reptilian features arranged in what Kethvar recognized as an expression of Imperial authority. Behind him, the bridge of the Imperial Fist buzzed with activity as one of the Empire's most powerful warships prepared for battle. "Human leadership," Vorthak began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I am Admiral Vorthak of the Imperial Fleet. You will immediately cease all hostile activities, submit to Imperial authority, and prepare to receive boarding parties for inspection of your facilities. Resistance will be met with the full force of Imperial justice." Sarah listened to the ultimatum with the patient attention of a teacher waiting for a student to finish reciting a lesson. When Vorthak finished speaking, she nodded politely. "Thank you for that, Admiral. I'm Captain Sarah Chen, and I'm afraid we'll have to decline your generous offer. However, we'd like to make a counter-proposal." Vorthak's expression shifted to one of disbelief. "Counter-proposal? You are facing the might of the Imperial Fleet. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." "Actually," Sarah said, consulting her tactical display, "we'd like to invite you to surrender to us. I think you'll find our terms quite reasonable." The silence that followed was profound. Even Kethvar, who had begun to understand human capabilities, was stunned by the casual way Sarah had just invited an Imperial battle fleet to surrender. Vorthak's response was predictable. "All ships, attack formation. Target their orbital facilities and prepare to demonstrate Imperial power." "Computer," Sarah said calmly, "initiate revelation protocol." What happened next would be remembered as one of the most significant moments in galactic history. Throughout the Terran system, the last of the concealment fields collapsed simultaneously. Hundreds of ships that had been invisible to Imperial sensors suddenly appeared on every tactical display in Vorthak's fleet. But these weren't the primitive vessels the Empire expected. They were massive, elegant warships that dwarfed even Imperial dreadnoughts. The human fleet didn't attack or move aggressively into battle formation. Instead, they simply appeared, like mountains materializing from morning mist, surrounding the Imperial force so completely that escape became impossible. "Admiral Vorthak," Sarah said into the stunned silence, "I'd like you to meet the Terra Defense Fleet. Each of our ships outgunned your dreadnought by approximately 4-1, and our defensive systems are designed specifically to counter Imperial weapons technology. We've been studying your tactics and technology for over 2 centuries. On the tactical displays, energy readings from the human ships began registering at levels that made Imperial power cores look like flickering candles. Weapon systems that operated on unknown principles locked onto every Imperial vessel simultaneously, while defensive fields strong enough to deflect stellar radiation enveloped the human fleet. "This is impossible," Vorthak whispered, his voice carrying clearly over the communication link. "No," Director Webb said, stepping into view beside Sarah. "This is what happens when a species has 200 years to prepare for a conversation they knew was inevitable. We've been ready for this moment since our great-grandparents first detected your scout ships." Kethvar watched Vorthak's face cycle through disbelief, rage, and finally a dawning recognition of just how completely the Empire had underestimated humanity. The tactical situation was hopeless. The Imperial fleet was outgunned, outnumbered, and completely surrounded by ships employing technology they couldn't understand, let alone counter. "Your choice, Admiral," Sarah continued gently. "We can demonstrate our weapons capabilities if you need proof of our intentions, but I prefer not to damage perfectly good ships. We're not interested in conquest or destruction. We're interested in establishing a new relationship between our peoples based on mutual respect rather than domination." "You're offering alliance?" Vorthak asked, his military training warring with his recognition of the impossible situation he faced. "We're offering partnership," Sarah corrected. The Empire's approach of ruling through strength has created stability in this region, but it's also created stagnation. Imagine what our species could accomplish together: imperial organizational capabilities combined with human innovation. Your industrial capacity merged with our technological advancement. The offer hung in space between the two fleets like a bridge spanning an impossible chasm. For the first time in imperial history, a species was offering cooperation from a position of strength rather than submitting from weakness. What about imperial authority? Vorthak asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. The Empire will need to learn to work with equals rather than subjects. Director Webb replied, "At least where humanity is concerned. We're not interested in changing how you govern other species, but we won't be governed ourselves." Kethvar watched the exchange with fascination. The humans had engineered this entire situation, not just the technological preparation, but the psychological framework as well. They had studied imperial culture and psychology well enough to know exactly how to present their revelation for maximum impact while minimizing the likelihood of a destructive conflict. After several minutes of silence, Admiral Vorthak spoke again. "I need to consult with Imperial Command." "Of course," Sarah agreed. "Take all the time you need. We've waited this long. We can wait a little longer." As the communication ended and Vorthak's fleet held position, surrounded by the revealed might of human civilization, Kethvar realized he was witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Empire's age of unquestioned dominance was over, replaced by something more complex, but potentially far more powerful. "Why reveal yourselves now?" he asked Sarah. "You could have remained hidden for decades longer." Sarah's smile took on a slightly sad quality. "Because isolation isn't living, Admiral. We've spent 2 centuries becoming strong enough to defend our freedom. Now we want to use that strength to build something better than either of our civilizations could create alone." Looking out at the human fleet, understanding finally dawned on Kethvar. The humans hadn't been preparing for war. They had been preparing for peace, but a peace built on strength, mutual respect, and the kind of partnership that only became possible when both sides brought equal power to the negotiating table. And through it all, despite holding overwhelming military advantage, the humans continued to smile, not with arrogance or triumph, but with the genuine warmth of a people who had finally found others worthy of calling friends. The galaxy would never be the same.